My name's Matthew Kamm. I'm the Associate Director of Field Conservation.
My name's Kirsten Ward, and I am the Conservation Outreach Coordinator for Zoo New England.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. All right, y'all, so I am always excited to be bringing a new facility onto the podcast, especially when it's one that I've been hoping to get on for a long time. And that is why today I am very pleased to bring you an episode from Zoo New England. And not only am I excited that I'm going to finally be having Zoo New England joining the Rossifari family, but I'm excited because, well, y'all know I love it when we go deep into the woods on conservation work that is being done by zoos. And this episode is all about the field conservation work being done by a team that is dedicated to just that work at Zoo New England. As a matter of fact, when we were setting up the interview, I asked which zoo we were going to be doing the interview at because Zoo New England actually has two zoos, Franklin Park Zoo and Stone Zoo, both of which are in different parts of Boston. And I was told that we didn't know if we'd even be at a zoo because the field conservation team is always out in the field, right? And I guess that makes a lot of sense, but it was just really impressive to me because that's just so cool. Just an entire team of employees paid by the zoo, but out in the field doing the thing. I love it and I respect it so much. So I'm excited to share that story with you today. But before we get to that, a couple quick reminders. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any of these Tuesday interview episodes or any of my Friday Zoo News episodes. Also, make sure that you're following along on the socials at Rossifari, on TikTok at Rossifari Pod. And don't forget that you can support the podcast for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. You can even get some free cool stickers depending on what tier you sign up for. So with all of that said, I want to just turn it over. It's time. We're going to talk conservation. We're talking turtles. We're talking some other cool amphibians. I even let them talk about plants a little bit. Oh, and birds. So without further ado, here is my interview with Kirsten Ward and Matthew Kamm of Zoo New England.
So I help direct all of our local conservation programs here in New England, as well as helping to participate some in our international conservation programs all around the world.
Very cool.
My role is to connect the public to the conservation work that our organization is doing, as well as educate all of the community members on the wildlife that they have here in their backyard, as well as internationally.
Very cool. And one thing that I have found spending a good amount of time in New England is that there is a lot of wildlife up here. Now, I don't know how much of that makes its way into Boston proper, where we are right now, because we're at Franklin Park Zoo. But rescued a beaver the other day from some people and have seen opossums and fox and deer and a North American porcupine. And these are just on my drives home after my show every night. So I think that, making the public aware of what is around them is so wildly important. So that's a very cool role. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive right into some of the conservation stuff that's happening here. And the thing that I am the most excited about is that y'all work on some turtle conservation. And I do love me my shellheads. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So we work with several different species of rare turtles, some of which are state listed, state endangered, some of which are IUCN Red List endangered. So like the international people who determine when animals are endangered, they say, yes, these turtles are endangered. Our primary work is with Blanding's turtles, as well as wood turtles, spotted turtles, and eastern box turtles. People are sometimes surprised when I say we work with eastern box turtles because in a lot of parts of their range, they are a very common turtle. Here in New England, not so much. They're really at the kind of northern edge of their range. You can only find them in a few scattered places in Massachusetts. In New Hampshire, where we also work with them, they are super endangered. So we're really excited to be working with those populations to support them as well.
Very cool. And we will dive into what those efforts look like in a moment. But first, we have to talk about the two ambassadors for this program that happen to live in this building. Because when you walk into the zoo offices here, you are immediately met by
Thumbelina and Bertha.
And who are Thumbelina and Bertha?
They're a couple of our Blandings turtle hatchlings who are being given a head start in human care. Head starting is one of the big tools that we use to sort of support turtle populations. Turtle survival in the wild, especially for hatchlings, is pretty bleak. A lot of people say something like 1 out of 100 turtle hatchlings will reach adulthood. And in many cases, that's just sort of how nature goes. But in sort of an increasingly urban New England landscape, additional threats like being hit by vehicles or huge sort of inflated populations of raccoons, coyotes, nest and hatchling predators, really, they take it on the chin in a big way. So by helping our turtles grow larger and healthier in their first couple of years, we found that we can increase their survival in the wild as much as 40 times relative to a wild hatched turtle. So Thumbelina and Bertha they were held back a year. We ordinarily Head Start turtles for just 9 months out of a year. But they were tiny. Some turtles just behaviorally, genetic variation, we don't know why. Some of them are just not fast growers. They're not good eaters. Much like humans, there's a lot of variation in the population. So here, actually, the staff around the sort of building that we're in right now are huge fans of the turtles. They provide TLC like nobody else. So this is, I think, the 3rd year in a row that we've given them sort of our slow-growing, held back a year to grow some more turtles, and they've just blossomed, as they always do. So Thumbelina and Bertha are growing beautifully now, and they're on track to be released back to their wild population that they hatched from this summer.
That's fantastic. I love that. And of course, we need to talk about the details, but that just shows how much individualized care and attention these turtles get, which is fantastic. Plus, like I said, you also get to see them, which is pretty great because they are beautiful. Now, you did mention, and I had noticed that I wasn't quite sure if they were Blandings turtles, and that's because there's something that's kind of missing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So Blandings turtles, the way you identify them typically in the wild, if you see them, is their bright yellow chin and throat. So right under their mouth and down their throat is normally like canary yellow. It's really striking. These guys don't have that yet. It can take a little while to develop even in wild turtles, but what we particularly noticed is it's the wild food that really seems to bring out that yellow color. So even though our turtles are healthy, they're growing really well on the diets that we feed them as part of the Head Starting program. They don't really develop that vivid yellow color until they've been in the wild eating wild food for a while. So like a lot of sort of carotenoid-based pigments like that yellow, it's not terribly surprising, but it's kind of interesting because they look very different in captivity, even than hatchlings that you might find in the wild.
Yeah, I found that fascinating. I thought they were Blandings turtles, and then I completely second-guessed myself because of that. And I was looking at the little chart of turtles that you have out there, and I was like, these clearly aren't Eastern box. They're not spotted. I couldn't figure it out, but that is really fascinating. And so, yeah, okay. So let's talk more about how we Head Start turtles. So just talk through the process. I'll ask questions if they come up.
Yeah. So a lot of our population that we're currently monitoring, whether it be these Blandings or wood turtles or spotted, we encounter the adults that we're radio tracking through trapping sessions. So we do a lot of exploratory trapping sessions at new sites to just identify where populations are. And then if we come across adults, especially adult females, who will potentially be laying nest come nest laying season, which here in Massachusetts is about May, June time. We'll radio track those adults during that nesting season and identify where they're laying their eggs. And once they lay those eggs, we protect those nests. And once those eggs hatch out a few months later, those are the hatchlings that we're able to raise in both organizations like here at Franklin Park, as well as different schools throughout all of New England.
Okay, so obviously we have to pause there. Schools all throughout New England. Explain. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so this is something that Brian Windmiller actually began with our conservation department. This idea that schools and local school kids were capable of caring for and raising wild, threatened turtle species. And he had a few participating classrooms that year in Concord, Massachusetts, who took in these hatchling turtles, raised them for the duration of their school year, and then at the end of their school year, they came out on a field trip with Brian, observed the turtles' habitat from their natal population, and released them back into that habitat. And Brian then followed those turtles and found that they were incredibly successful. And that's kind of where that all began. And we actually recently just did an analysis of kind of all of the data we've collected throughout these past 15, 16 years. And we found that school children are actually incredible at caring for and raising these threatened turtles.
That's amazing. How old are these kids?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of different age ranges, and we're doing programming in their school throughout the year. So not only are they raising the turtles, they're learning lots about them as well. So that pairs with that care for the turtles. It really makes them a lot more connected to the individuals and gives them that knowledge to better care for them. And our ideal age range is really like 3rd through 5th grade. But we have some outlying kindergarten and 2nd grade and even some high school clubs. So we do have kind of this varying range. But really, as far as our programming goes, the 3rd through 5th is our ideal range.
It's kind of astonishing. I have a son who's in 4th grade and who I think would do an incredible job with something like that. But I've also met some of his friends. And so all I'm going to say is that I think that y'all must be giving some really good guidance if this is working well.
Exactly. It definitely does come with us introducing the idea and why these turtles are in these classrooms in the first place. There's a lot of emphasis on the fact that these turtles are not a classroom pet, as maybe other classrooms they've been in or friends may have. These are endangered species that are going back out into the wild and need to be cared for in a way that acknowledges that. So we do a lot of introductory and knowledge around the program with the kids. So it really does. It involves them in their local conservation, which I think really puts a fire under them. They want to do well with this.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I like that so much. I am curious. So in general, when we talk about animals that are going to be raised for release, it's a very different thing than other animals that are in human care. You could not go and grab one of the red pandas here right now and drop them in Nepal because they would be like, hey, where are my biscuits? You know, right? This is not what we do. So how do you adapt how you raise these turtles for that? And then how, again, do you get that into a classroom?
Yeah. So we're kind of fortunate in working with turtles in that they are animals with no parental care whatsoever, right? So these turtles in the wild, if all had gone according to sort of the course of nature, they would have hatched, dug their own way out of their nest where they were buried. They might never even meet their parents. They have to figure everything out from square one. They have strong instincts for survival. So thankfully, we're not dealing with problems that you might have in birds or mammals that will imprint, for example, on parental figures or that will become sort of reliant on human care. These turtles are ready to fend for themselves from day one. So fortunately, they don't lose that instinct. And also only had starting them for 9 months is a good way to avoid making sure that they don't get into sort of captive habits. And we also carefully sort of control their environment to mimic their natural environment as much as possible. So all of the tanks that we furnish to the classrooms, we help them set it up. So our experts are there in the classrooms, making sure that all of the tanks have places for them to bask, plants for them to hide in and engage in sort of their natural anti-predator behaviors. as well as, lights that provide the necessary UV, but also we change the timers on the lights as the year goes by so that they learn the annual cycle of light and dark and how it changes through the year, which when they're in the wild is going to be important for cueing things like breeding or hibernation that they're going to need to be able to do in the wild. And then in the sort of weeks and months heading up to their release, often we'll have teachers turn off or turn down the heater so that they learn to deal with a range of temperatures in the tank, not just sort of the perfect for growth ideal that they had previously, and to start feeding them wild live food, like invertebrates similar to what they'll be eating in the wild. So they learn how to handle those foods, and they learn how to deal with a variety of conditions. And we also make it clear to the kids, right, like Kirsten said, these are not pets. These are wild animals that are going back to the wild. You're not going to be teaching them tricks, right? We don't engage in any kind of training like we might with a lot of animals that are in zoo care, where we want the animals to be able to participate in their own care, and training can be enrichment for them. But these turtles receive no training whatsoever. They're fed by the kids. They are weighed to make sure that they're growing appropriately. And otherwise, the kids observe them from outside the tank, but they're not being taken out and handled or trained.
Makes a lot of sense. Very cool. So, yeah, sorry, when you said tricks, all I could picture was a turtle jumping through a hoop, which would never happen, but is just a great mental
It's a fun thing to imagine.
Yeah, I like it.
We've seen some peppy turtles.
Yeah, I mean, I've known some turtles with some serious attitude. So, yeah. So we're talking about a couple different species of turtles here. And I'd like to kind of talk about the similarities and differences of them. Like in my own experience, I have met some really feisty eastern box turtles. I don't know if that's always the case or not. And I would say that wood turtles are some of the smartest, especially herps that I've ever met. So I would love for y'all to just riff and kind of tell me what you think about the species.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a really funny conversation because I think each of us who works with all of these different species have our own opinion on what we feel about the turtles and how they differ. Not just speaking from a factual point, but we all have our own dynamics with the turtles, working with them, as well as the students. They each kind of perceive all of the different species that we talk about very differently. So it is really fun to have this conversation about how they are so different. The Blandings, I have a special place in my heart for. They really do get this kind of derpy, smiley persona. And they are just very docile. I found that they are one of the species that are easiest to really work with. They really do the best when it comes to head starting and to adapting, to eating and new transitions throughout head starting process. So they're one of my particular favorites, but Matt can speak on wood turtles.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the wood turtles, and I would definitely agree that the wood turtles are smart. I actually gave a program in one of the towns where we work at their library this past week. So I was taking some of our head-started wood turtles along, and one of the wood turtles figured out how to nose open the lid of their travel container and was trying to climb out. Like, I was right there, so there was no risk to the animal. Right. But there were some kids at the library talk, and they got a real kick out of watching him do that. And, they talk about how wood turtles will drum their feet on the ground to mimic rainfall that attracts earthworms to come up. Yeah, they're really clever, and I think it comes from the fact that they are really amphibious in their habits. Like, all of these turtles both can swim and walk on land to some extent. Even the box turtles can go in the water a little bit. Mm-hmm. But wood turtles really go back and forth frequently, just about every day. They forage on land as well as in the water. They have to deal with a really wide variety of habitats. But, in captive care, it can make it tricky because they tend to be very wary. Right. And so oftentimes wood turtles, they might have a strong prey drive, but then it's like, all right, I'm going to give you an earthworm to try and get you eating. Sometimes we have reluctant eaters, and then they only want earthworms. And they know if we try to offer them, their balanced pellet diet, it's like, this isn't wiggling. I want the wiggling food, please. And they won't eat until you give them the food, and they know you have it. Right. So they're waiting for you to bring out the good stuff. Spotted turtles are very shy. They're really kind of more reclusive, I'd say, than our other turtles. They spend a lot of their time hiding, which for their small size makes sense. Spotted turtles grow, even at full size, they're less than half of the size of a full-grown Blandings or wood turtle. But they're really beautiful. Like the spotted patterns, they're born with just like one spot per scoot. Mm-hmm. And then as they get older, they develop really almost a constellation of spots all over their shells. They're very attractive. But we found the hatchlings to be very shy. And they don't grow as fast as the others simply because they're not as large, generally speaking. And box turtles, absolutely the prima donnas of the program. They know what they want, and they are more omnivorous as youngsters and as adults than the others who are primarily carnivorous, even though they'll all take some plant matter as well. Box turtles really do split. They eat a lot of mushrooms too. So we always offer the box turtles a really varied diet, including like greens and things like sweet potatoes and fresh fruit, as well as worms and all kinds of things. And, they'll get their favorites, and almost like a toddler, right? They'll eat only their favorite part and they'll leave all of the rest. And they don't really care to hear from us about nutrition or the importance of a balanced diet. But also, when they learn to hinge up their shells, they get very quick about it, and they're not at all shy about crushing any digits that might be trying to get a look at their eyes or their limbs or anything while you're in the process of giving them an exam. So, yeah.
Fun. I do have a question about the spotteds. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how to phrase it, so I'll just tell you the story. Yeah. So I live in the Buffalo area, and they have an amazing spotted turtle habitat at the Buffalo Zoo. And I was watching 2 different times. I was watching a feeding there. And both times they were doing a scatter feed. And the first turtle got the first bit of food, and then every other spotted turtle wanted that one. And they chased that turtle all around the water and land, fighting for this piece of food, while all the other pieces of food just sat there in the water. Would you say that's a normal behavior, or is that just that there are some weird ones at the Buffalo Zoo?
I haven't seen that personally with our spotted turtles. I expect in a group living situation like that, where those turtles have all been living together for a really long time, they've probably established their own kind of social dynamics. Because it's really not a situation like what you would find spotted turtles sort of doing in the wild.
Okay.
They might estivate together. We do occasionally find spotted turtles that have all come to like the one good brumation or estivation spot, and then they're all hanging out together there during like a low activity season. But typically when we find them in the wild, they're each off kind of doing their own thing. So I think the emergent social dynamics in the zoo might be more to blame for that than any particular inclination of spotted turtles, at least based on my experience.
Okay, fair. I know that it would be too anthropomorphic to say that they are jealous, but those animals at the very least seem to be pretty jealous of each other.
Certainly any individual animal can be.
Okay, I just had to ask because, twice I've seen that now, and it is really funny. And as you know, spotted turtles aren't the best at moving, so the chase is not maybe as dramatic as it would be if it was lions doing it or whatever, Yeah. So cool. Thank you for the breakdown on the different species. I really like that. And I'm curious, what is the facility like where y'all do this, and how many turtles are going to be in there at any given time, and how is it set up for that? Is it on grounds or off grounds? Tell me the things.
Yeah, so we have our own office off grounds of Zoo Campus over in Acton. And during active hatchling season, we do have clutches of adorable new hatchlings in our office that are transferring from nest to office in these transition tanks that support both terrestrial habitat as well as aquatic. So they really do get this opportunity to work their way into the water as they would out in the wild. They stay in that dynamic for a few weeks, and then they're transferred over to either one of our team's homes, where we will then keep them until they are transitioned into classrooms. So that time period is really a lot of shuffling around of the hatchlings, and getting them into the classrooms can be this very strategic coordination of making sure these better eaters are going to be going to classrooms that, are newer and don't have as much experience and could use the easier turtles of the bunch. And then these more difficult turtles, they have extra time with us, who are more reluctant eaters. So it can be a real shuffle of hatchlings at our facility, if you will.
Cool. How many schools are involved?
Yeah, so we have 30 schools involved in our hatch program, and a lot of them do the full, what we call the full hatch program, which is where we go into the classroom and do 3 programs throughout the year. We have an introductory program where we actually bring in the turtles. So the students haven't actually met the turtles until after we've given them the program where they learn all about why they're doing this in the first place. We go back into the classrooms during the winter. We talk all about the turtles' brumation out in the wild. And then we go back into the classroom a third time right before their field trip around the spring. And we talk about what releasing the turtles is going to look like. Why are we doing this? What are they to expect once they're back into the wild? And then the students actually come out on a field trip and explore the entire habitat. We walk a loop. We set up all of our turtle traps so that they can meet other turtle species in the habitat. They're turtles' new neighbors, if you will. And then they actually get to wave goodbye and let these turtles swim off for the last time that they will see them. So we have 30 schools involved, and most of them are in that full program.
That's awesome. I can't even imagine being a kid and getting to have that experience. I've gotten to help with some rehab turtles and take care of them and then release them and stuff. And that feeling and watching them walk or swim away is magical as an adult. And as an adult who has a lot of cool animal experiences under my belt, I cannot imagine being that age and getting to experience that.
It is so special. And that's a really big reason why this program is so important, is not just because of the increase in survivorship we see with the populations, but of the heart that it provides for the students. They now walk away, all of these kids, with this heart for these threatened species and for that habitat, for those species they just released. So it really does send them away with this idea of conservation and the ability that they're capable to do things that are going to make a difference in the world. So it's very special in both of those ways.
Yeah, that is awesome. And that's one thing that I always like to say, and I will say to y'all as well, is that the coolest thing about it is yeah, sure, they walk away with that heart, and that, and some will more than others, whatever. But you never fully know the impact that it's going to have, And I the reason I started Rossifari was talking to keepers at different accredited zoos around the country, and not one of them knows that they were the person, one of the people that inspired me to start this thing that has now helped with conservation in so many ways and has become a big thing and raised thousands of dollars for animals and all this cool stuff. Not one of them knows that, that weird guy who talked to me about red pandas for a little too long and then was weirdly disappointed that we don't have binturongs at our facility is that guy and is helping and, no idea. And it's so cool that you never fully know what impact you have with this stuff. I think that's really special. Now, I do want to talk about something. We dropped the word anthropomorphism a little bit, and it's a scary word in the zoological setting sometime. I'm pro anthropomorphism to a certain point because I do think that you have to create empathy, and especially working with children. And especially children that you're going to have turtles in the room. I'm curious if y'all have thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. We do encourage the kids to name the turtles, for example. So all of the turtles that enter the program have, numbers that we assign them for scientific tracking purposes that go into our databases. But the kids are always really excited to name the turtles. Usually, often teachers will have a class vote where kids can vote for the names of their turtles. And then they'll often ask us, are they boys or girls, when they're coming up with a name. And we'll say, well, they look exactly the same as babies. So we can't tell you right now, but it's actually, we do sort of a reveal at the end of the year because often we have nest temperature data. So for the Blandings turtles, we have nest temperature data and they have temperature-dependent sex determination. In wood turtles, it's chromosomal, so we really don't know. But for the Blandings turtles, we can make a pretty good guess based on nest temperature. But it's a good opportunity to talk to the kids and say, do you think the turtles will mind if you give them a human name that doesn't align with the turtle's sex? And then they stop and think, oh, well, I guess not. right? But they want to give the turtles names that they like, and we totally encourage that. And then when it comes to say like, oh, so it turns out this year was, a cold year, so your turtles are both boys. Sometimes they're like, oh no, but we gave them a girl name. And I say, I promise you, it doesn't matter to the turtles. But it is often useful, as you say, for fostering empathy, right? When we're talking about the turtles going back to the wild, we ask them to imagine, so what's going to change for your turtles? It's one of the questions we ask at that pre-field trip presentation. And they say like, oh, no one's going to come around and hand them food anymore. And like, they're going to have to learn what predators are. And they're going to have to learn how to like hide in the natural environment. And you can kind of see them imagining themselves, where it was like, oh, okay, so if I was taken out of my nice, comfortable house and I was then put in a sort of like wild survival situation, what would I have to do? Like, how would that change things for me? And so I think it's almost as useful to us for the kids to start thinking like turtles as it is for them to start like thinking about how the turtles are like humans. But then we also talk a lot about how turtles and humans are not so different. A lot of the factors of biology are really similar. We show them the skeletal structure. And it's like, hey, a turtle shell is just its rib cage and backbone, like same bones that you have in your body. We show them a sea turtle skeleton and say like, look, even inside those flippers, they literally have 5 fingers on their skeleton, just like you do. And they're even the same relative lengths as each other. So those are useful too. And I think it helps kids, especially kids who are maybe a little like running kind of cold on reptiles as animals, realize that like, oh, compared to sea anemones or insects or a lot of the animals on Earth, like humans and turtles are not so different.
And I think it's a valuable conversation to have depending on the topic, because there's so many comparisons that especially kids can make with different animals. And we talk a lot about it in regards to turtles nesting and then leaving those eggs and never coming back to see those hatchlings, not caring for them. And we compare this to other species, to other animals, to us, to, piping plovers who, are guarding their nest and will display that broken wing if they feel they're threatened and their babies are threatened. So we do go through and compare these differences between these species, because I do think it's really important to connect that we're not so different, but we don't all go about things the same way. And that's just a part of life.
Yeah, there's a whole deeper message than just turtles in that, which I like that. I like your approach to that. That's very cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. So, all right. We've talked a little bit about the school program. We've talked a little bit about the location, and we've obviously talked about the turtles. But I'm guessing that's not the only conservation work that you're doing at Zoo New England. So want to tell me about some other stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So we love herps. We love the reptiles and amphibians in our department. And we have also taken part in a big marbled salamander restoration project. Marbled salamanders are another species where any of your sort of southeastern listeners are going to be saying, well, it's a common species. Like down there it is, up here, not so much. Again, they're kind of at the northern edge of their range. But particularly when we're thinking about things like climate change, where a lot of animals' species sort of ranges are going to be shifting northward probably in the coming decades, it's really valuable for us to understand how they make their living here at the northern edge of their range, because there's going to be more kind of migrating northward steadily, I expect, over the years. And so we worked at a pretty urban park called the Middlesex Fells, which is right near Stone Zoo, our other location. And the Middlesex Fells was actually industrial until the turn of the 20th century. Like there was a rubber factory there that was like the forerunner to Goodyear, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then it was made a park right around the beginning of the 20th century. We know that there used to be marbled salamanders there, but they disappeared in around the 1920s. So then we have been actually working to reintroduce marbled salamanders to the vernal pools at the Middlesex Fells. And just 2 years ago, we finally found larvae, right? So we found that the animals that we had translocated from another site in Massachusetts in cooperation with the state Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, who oversee all of our wildlife work and who permit it, right? Don't try this at home, kids. Please don't start your own kind of restoration or relocation programs. Moving wildlife can go very, very wrong if you do it even a little bit inappropriately. But fortunately, our salamanders have taken. And so now every year we're finding larvae in the vernal pools in the Middlesex Fells, where we've now reintroduced this population, and they're back after 90 plus years absence at the fells. So that was a really cool find, and it's a project that we're really proud of.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, very cool. Tell me a little bit more about like what went into that. Like, how did you go about that?
Yeah, it was a tricky process. Marbled salamanders have a very different life cycle from most of the salamanders. So most salamanders, right, they come out at the big night in springtime. They lay their eggs in a vernal pool where there's no fish. The eggs hatch, the babies grow up over the spring, and then right around summer, as the pools are drying up, the salamanders grow their legs, lose their gills, and move up onto land. Marbled salamanders lay their eggs in the fall. And they actually lay them when the pools are still dry. So the females will lay the eggs and then stay with them. They'll curl up around the eggs to keep them moist and wait for the pools to fill up with the fall rain or snow. Yeah. So they curl up and they wait for them. And then when the pool fills up and inundates the eggs, then the mothers go back to forage and they leave them for the winter. And the babies are actually incredibly cold tolerant. They hatch and grow sometimes under the ice of a frozen vernal pool all winter long, which then gives them an advantage when spring comes around because all of the other frogs and salamanders come and lay their eggs. And the marbled salamander larvae are now the biggest, baddest kids on the block. So they can compete for food really effectively. But that means in order to get marbled salamanders, we had started them just like we do the turtles. But to get the larvae, we actually had to go out to the pools in the winter, sometimes breaking the ice on the surface to get to them, and then collecting not just the salamanders, but Daphnia, little water fleas, and getting other like tiny invertebrates to feed them, and setting up these really fiddly sort of tanks with perfect conditions. Amphibians can be really environmentally sensitive, but we had started them not just at the zoo, but also we brought that into schools, especially schools immediately surrounding the Middlesex Fells. So whenever possible, we like to involve classrooms that are in the communities where these animals live, not taking them on like a long trip somewhere like remote to things not in their town. But whenever possible, kids are raising animals that are then actually going to be living in their town. And that's what we did here. So a couple of schools in Medford, Stoneham, towns surrounding the Middlesex Fells actually raised these salamanders in their classroom. They got to watch them metamorphose from swimming tadpoles into crawling juvenile salamanders. And then we come out and release them in the spring.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that you keep it, local. That's really cool. How much harder is it to sell teachers on salamanders than turtles?
It's definitely a little harder. The salamander's husbandry is more demanding, right, than the turtles, and that you don't get to see them as much, especially once they metamorphose, right? So that the tadpoles are small; they're like an inch at most. And then when they metamorphose to be juveniles, they follow their juvenile instincts to hide. And they spend pretty much all their time under bark chips or the other things that we've placed in their habitat to give them that natural cover, or they burrow. Right? Marbled salamanders are part of the family called mole salamanders because the juveniles and the adults spend almost all of their time underground. So you don't get to see them until you like lift up to specifically look for them hiding after they metamorphose. But the teachers who did do it found it incredibly rewarding, and getting to watch metamorphosis of amphibians can be really magical. But we've actually, a lot of high schools did that because, again, the husbandry is more challenging, but it's super worthwhile, I think, for a lot of biology curricula to be able to get to see amphibian metamorphosis.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Wow, that's very cool. I knew none of that. I really like the idea of the moms curling up and all of that. That's just so cute and different than and again, people talk about, these animals being non-charismatic, but then you hear a story like that and it's just like, oh, yeah, how can you not love that? Very cool. And so, you mentioned that with the turtles that you've seen about a 40 times, I forget how you phrased it, but they do 40 times better. Yeah. How does that, do we have numbers on the salamanders?
We still don't know. It's early days. Okay. So we started this program in 2017 with the salamanders, and marbled salamanders can take 3 or 4 years to reach sexual maturity. So for the first several years we were head starting, we had no idea how it was going because the juveniles literally disappear right into the forest. They're under the leaf litter. They're underground. We don't see them. And then finally we found the larvae. So we see, and we have confirmed, we've only had now like 2 field seasons of being able to actually find any of our head starting alumni, any of the juveniles and the adults. What we have found, fortunately, is that there's a diversity of age classes. So we found older ones that might have been from the original sort of 2017 release, and smaller juveniles that are probably from a more recent, maybe 2020 cohort. So we at least know that every year some are surviving. But because the adults and the juveniles are so cryptic, they're so hard to find, we still don't really have good data on how well they're surviving. But since they survived well enough to breed and establish, they've sort of passed our bar. But we're definitely going to continue monitoring and supporting that population as time goes on and hopefully gathering more data. But yeah, it's too early to say.
Right. But I mean, that's awesome. Yeah. Like you said, just finding the larvae is huge.
Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm curious, is it possible, I know that some of the turtles or maybe the salamanders as well will be held back, like you mentioned. But is it possible to fail out of the program?
In very rare instances.
Okay.
The only sort of turtles that have quote unquote failed out of the programs are those that were born with congenital defects that would make them non-releasable. So there's a turtle right now at Stone Zoo whose name is August. August is a wood turtle. She was born with one eye. And, that's not necessarily an unsurvivable sort of injury in the wild. We have a lot of three-legged turtles in the wild who do just fine, for example. It's a pretty common injury among turtles to lose a limb. But I've been sort of actually examining August recently, trying to determine whether she's a candidate for release or whether she will be sort of living out her home as a member of our sort of Zoo New England family. And it seems like she might have some some developmental neurological wiring didn't quite go right, even on that sort of side of her head. Because I was doing sort of a test of her alertness to see how she would protect herself from predators. And on one side, like as soon as my finger came into her field of view on her good side, she would withdraw into her shell, just the reflex we want to see. On the other side, I've got a video of it. I would actually reach around and I would even tap the side of her head and she wouldn't react.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's possible that, just developmentally something didn't go quite right. She's been eating, she's been growing, she's been doing well in captivity, but I would worry for her. So instances like that, we might look to sort of add those turtles to our Zoo New England family, but that's very much not our intent or the purpose of the program. It's really about helping wild animals, which we do 99.9% of the time. I think that's really the only case I can think of where we've looked at trying to retain a turtle specifically as an ambassador rather than releasing them as planned.
Wow, that's really impressive. Like I know that's not the goal.
Right.
But I also figured, if anything, I was thinking, well, it's cool that you've got Zoo New England here where you can take the failures, and I'm air quoting that, but wow, it sounds like that's not really a thing.
No.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Are there any other conservation programs here that you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Yeah, along with our support for the actual animals in the wild, we're also supporting their habitat. We do a lot of habitat restoration projects. Specifically, we're working with a lot of native wildflower populations. The blazing star is a big one that we are
propagating them, and we're planting them out at spots where we think they could do well, or where we know that historically that wildflower was present. New England blazing star is a New England endemic, found nowhere else in the world. It's a beautiful flower that looks like purple fireworks. Ooh. And they're also really a great nectar flower for lots of butterflies, including monarchs. So we're reintroducing or experimentally introducing New England blazing star at a lot of sites where it seems like it would do well. And it can be a good kind of foundation of pollinator habitat.
We do also have a lot of international conservation projects. I believe that we're up to 22 right now, 22 international projects that we are partnering with international conservation organizations. And this can range anywhere from us going out there and working on the ground with those folks to, funding students who are going to be researching, endangered species out in these international countries themselves.
That's very cool. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Now, are y'all involved in any SAFE programs?
Yes. I'm actually our institutional representative for Safe North American Songbirds. Nice. My sort of history in schooling was all in birds. I love birds. So I'm our institutional rep for that program. And we also have a lot of the International Dark Sky Association sort of activity on campus, which those are kind of related because turning off lights at night benefits birds as well as a lot of other organisms. We're also involved with, what are some other SAFE programs?
The Chinchilla Project?
Chinchilla SAFE, yeah. Our international chinchilla partnership is being headed up by Safe Chinchilla. And Safe Red Siskin, which is very new. That's also one of our newest international partnerships. I'm always coming back to the birds. But Red Siskin's a really cool bird. We've got a pair here at Franklin Park Zoo who are going to be part of the captive assurance population. So we're going to be breeding those to try and increase the captive population, hopefully for reintroduction to the wild, but also just to ensure that these birds don't go extinct. They're now relegated to a tiny fragment of their former range in Venezuela and a little bit in Guyana. But yeah, that's definitely another one.
Well, friendly reminder, y'all have red pandas.
Yes, we do.
And as one of the people, heading up Safe Red Panda, we'd love to have your support. So
Sold.
we'll talk to whoever we need to talk to about that.
Yeah, I know we
always gotta
participate in
plug it.
those programs. We just don't yet have an international partnership specifically for red panda conservation.
But I know that I have heard that's in the works.
Yeah.
Wait until you see. We just put in our 3-year plan with the AZA. So we're like getting approval and stuff right now. But we have some really cool initiatives, and I'm really excited about what we are looking to do in Nepal right now. So
look forward to seeing that.
Yeah. So yeah, I just thought I'd share just a friendly reminder that we exist, because always got to be plugging that program. But very cool. And then if people are interested in helping out with anything of, what they've heard today, how can they do that?
Yeah, so you can join our conservation society, sort of regardless of where you are. It's free. We're not trying to sell you anything. We get newsletters that will keep you up to date on our conservation activities. And if you live anywhere in New England or have friends who do, we also have tons of volunteer opportunities available. If you want to come out and plant native wildflowers to restore a wildflower meadow for pollinators, if you want to come out and learn how to track turtles at nesting season and maybe help us babysit a nesting turtle to see if she lays her eggs while our staff go and check on some other turtles, we've got opportunities like that. Salamander release day in May, always very, very popular. Conservation Society members are invited to come out and join us for the salamander release. So yeah, if you want to get your boots on the ground and come pitch in to help us, we welcome people to join the Conservation Society. As well as, your Zoo New England membership also directly funds our conservation work. We're really fortunate to have Zoo New England sort of valuing conservation as much as we do as an organization. It's a really amazing thing that we've got me and Kirsten and several of our coworkers, a whole department. We're almost never at the zoos. We're just out there working with local native wildlife all the time, and we are funded by the zoo. Like we're a zoo department. So donations to Zoo New England and the memberships support our conservation work directly, as well as all the amazing work that's being done on property at the zoos here.
Cool. Yeah, I do find that fascinating. When we were trying to get this all set up, I was like, so what zoo will this be at? And they're like, they're not at a zoo. And so thank you for coming to Franklin Park. This was lovely. But I was like, oh, okay, that y'all are really out doing the thing. Plus, you get your own cool logo that says, it has the Zoo New England logo, but it says field conservation on it. I mean, that's actually really cool. Like, I know that sounds funny, but like, the idea of that when you're walking around, people will see that there is actual field conservation happening just by seeing what you're wearing today is actually really cool and really important, as opposed to, a lot of facilities, you would just be wearing the Zoo New England thing, which is cool. And then people would walk up to you and be like, so are you a zookeeper? And maybe you could get that conversation going. But now everybody who, like, when y'all stop and buy, groceries today are going to see that there is a field conservation component to Zoo New England, which I actually think, branding is important, and I think that's really cool. So
we wear these out in the field as well. So when we're standing next to a rail trail, fishing out a turtle trap, and people are bicycling by on the rail trail and they stop and say, hey, what are you doing down there? We get to have a conversation. We say, I work for Zoo New England, and we are studying native turtles and protecting them here right next to the place where you ride your bike.
That's awesome. Do you think that when the turtles see that, they feel a little safer too? No.
I'd like to hope so, but if anything, I think they're thinking, oh, not these guys again.
Awesome. And then it is time. It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show, but there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
So this is actually from before my time at Zoo New England. I used to work for Mass Audubon doing breeding bird surveys for the Breeding Bird Atlas, which was an attempt to just sort of map the breeding ranges of every bird in Massachusetts. So while I was out in Western Massachusetts, basically hiking up a mountain, following, I think it was a Blackburnian warbler that I heard singing. So when we're doing a Breeding Bird Atlas, you want to try and get as good breeding evidence as you can. So like a bird singing on territory is a probable breeder if you hear it singing repeatedly, but if you can find the nest, that's confirmed breeding. So that's like even better. So I was trying to find the nest, and I actually stumbled upon another bird's nest while I was heading up this very steep hill, which was actually a turkey vulture nest. So I'd never seen a turkey vulture nest before. It was in sort of like a little almost cave formed by like a deadfall. So there was a big dead tree that had sort of fallen down on the side of this hill. And, it was kind of a rocky slope. So the babies, there were babies in there that hatched. They were still in their like white fuzzy Muppet stage. They were nowhere near fledging, but they were standing up and everything. And I was so amazed because I'd never seen baby turkey vultures before. And I learned a lot about baby turkey vultures that day. Most especially, I learned what their reaction to danger is, which is to projectile vomit.
Oh.
And boy, carrion smells bad going in, right? It smells bad before it's been partially digested by a vulture. I almost lost consciousness right there from how bad the smell was. Thankfully, they didn't actually hit me, but they sprayed in my direction, and it was the worst thing that I've ever smelled.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What do you got for us, Kirsten?
I have less of a gross story and more of a interesting, unique one. We recently did a study to investigate the diet of these Blandings turtles that we're monitoring. And a part of doing this was going out and radio tracking a bunch of turtles and bringing them into these bins where they were put in water and encouraged to defecate. And when we went and checked back the next day, we found exactly that. And one turtle in particular in their bin with them was the shed of a snake. It was a snake skin. And it was rather long. And it was definitely broken up into bits, but we actually put it on a nice piece of paper. We have it pinned up at our office. It's great artwork now. But it was a really fascinating poop story.
Poop story?
So I had to share. It was really, all of us were very, very interested by this. And we weren't thinking that this was something that these turtles would be eating, but opportunistic nonetheless.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
It was a total pleasure. Thank you so much.
Awesome people doing awesome things. Most importantly, for awesome turtles. I'm all about it. I am so grateful to the team at Zoo New England for helping me set this interview up. And of course, to Kirsten and Matthew for both doing the interview and for the work that you do. I just want to say thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. This was such a fun, different episode. I hope y'all enjoyed it as much as I did. I want to take a moment to say thank you to all of my patrons, especially my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, Melissa Reed, Carrie Kirkpatrick, John Lewis, also here for stickers, and Kevin Williams. Thank you all so much for supporting my efforts here. And yeah, we'll be back on Friday with a new Zoo News episode. Be telling you all about my crazy week out in Phoenix and Colorado, and also, covering all the zoo newsy stuff. See you then. And remember, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.